want to be a fantasy football champion, this is worth knowing. Over 73 running backs are being drafted this year, but only a handful are worth being on your team. These are the must-draft RBs for 2022. Now, this might surprise you because it surprised me, but Aaron Jones, this man right here, Packers running back, scores 20% more fantasy points, 17.6, in games where A.J. Dillon plays compared to when Dillon is out with just 14.7. And it's over a decent sample in the last 2 years since Dillon has been in the NFL of 7 games, and there's a reason for this, a big reason for this. One word: targets. Targets are worth 2.7 times more points to running backs in fantasy football over the last decade. And it's really simple to understand. You get a point per reception, a half a point per reception, but even if you don't do any points per reception in your league, yards after the catch are going to be 3 to 4 times as much as yards per carry. And you can see right here, Jones averages nearly 5 targets per game with Dillon active, and when he's out, 3.7. He sees 27% more targets when Dillon is out there. This means you should not be concerned about Dillon stealing more carries. I mean, last year Dillon had more carries. Jones saw 171 and A.J. Dillon saw 187. He had 16 more carries than Jones last year, and Jones still finished as the top 10 running back. And now Devante Adams is no longer a Packer, and in 7 games without Adams, Jones is averaging 25.97 points since 2019. This would literally rank number 1 ahead of Josh Allen last year amongst any position in fantasy football for scoring by nearly 2 points. Now, do you want to hear something crazy? Ezekiel Elliott's salary cap hit this year is $18.2 million, 22% more than any other running back in the league. And Elliott's $7 million cap hit ranked top 5 amongst running backs last year. Now, despite this, Tony Pollard still saw 176 opportunities. That's your targets plus your carries at the running back position, nearly 12 per game. And according to DraftShark's injury predictor tool, basically just takes a bunch of players, their age, the amount of wear and tear they've had, compared it to past situations and project forward. Zeke is expected to miss about 2.3 games this season. Now check this out. Tony Pollard has only played 1 game ever without Ezekiel Elliott, so it's a very small sample, but you need to check this out. He scored 31.2 points that game, the number 1 running back on the week by 5 points. And somehow Pollard goes as the 29th running back off the board, even though he's 1 injury away from being a top 5 running back in the NFL, and he already has built-in usage of 12 to 15 touches per game, while being in a borderline top 5 offense. And now he's going after Kenneth Walker, who's in potentially the worst offense in the NFL in a split backfield, led by either Geno Smith or Drew Lock. Go get yourself some Tony Pollard. And make sure to grab this next guy as well, because Josh Jacobs ranked top 10 amongst running backs in targets, and his 4.3 targets per game were more than Saquon Barkley. And when Kenyon Drake was injured last year, you really saw these targets pick up for Jacobs: 5, 7, 4, 9, 6, 4. It was easily a career-high stretch. And now Kenyon Drake is older, returning from injury, and a potential cut candidate because they drafted Zamir White, who's not known for his pass-catching skill set, which is good for Jacobs. And Jacobs' 5 targets per game from week 10 on ranked ahead of Alvin Kamara and DeAndre Swift. Now, if we pull up StatMuse here and look at their bar charts, this is since 2019 rushing yards, and you can see Josh Jacobs right now, he ranks 5th with over 3,000 yards. Now, the running backs that rank ahead of him, they're all elite dudes. Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, guys who at one point or another were top 10 drafted running backs, top 5 drafted running backs, and still are in fantasy football. Now, not only are the rushing yards elite, but when you factor in his receiving game work, he has had over 1,200 total yards every single year, and he's had at least 7 touchdowns each year of his career. And now Devante Adams is joining the team. So check this out. Since 2017, the Packers averaged 17% more rushing touchdowns per game. You can see this bottom column right here, almost 1 per game when Devante Adams is in the game. And this is due to Devante Adams being an efficient wide receiver. He keeps drives alive. He beats his man on 3rd down especially. He's the number 1 efficiency receiver since the beginning of 2019. And higher efficiency on offense leads to more red zone drives, where last year Jacobs only saw 43 red zone touches because they weren't there as often, or when they got there, they were throwing the ball. So when we're talking about the winners of the Devante Adams trade, maybe some of the Packers players, maybe Derek Carr, I think it's Josh Jacobs. Now in 2021, Melvin Gordon finished 18th amongst all running backs, and his teammate Javonte Williams finished 17th, just 1 spot ahead of him. Now despite this, Gordon is being taken as the 35th running back off the board, even though the Broncos just gave him a new contract to come back to the team this year and play the exact same role. Even more interesting, Melvin Gordon, if you look at his game-by-game splits, he saw the majority of the touches, meaning more touches and more snaps than Javonte Williams in 69% of the games. He was very much so involved to start the season, but also to close the season out. You could just look right here, including week 16, he was seeing 54% of the snaps. And his 231 total touches last year ranked top 15 amongst all running backs, which is pretty dang dang good for a guy going as the 35th RB off the board. Now, this is important to note. You're not trying to say Gordon is better than Javonte Williams. The goal is to identify value. Gordon is more valuable than your typical 35th running back off the board. For example, he goes behind James Cook, who is a rookie running back who might play on third downs, if that, for the Buffalo Bills this year. Gordon has a safe floor and expected to see at least 2 times the usage as the rookie James Cook. Now, last year, the Buccaneers saw 50-plus point totals in 60% of their games. And Leonard Fournette averaged 21.7 fantasy points per game in these contests. Now, this 21.7 point number would have actually ranked ahead of Jonathan Taylor last year for most fantasy points at the position. And in the games that Fournette actually played, he ranked 3rd overall amongst running backs. And Fournette's 6 targets per game led all other backs. Now, since 2010, targets per game leaders on average finished 6th the following year in fantasy points. However, Fournette currently goes outside the top 10 running backs as the running back 11. But if I pull up my tiers, he's my running back 6, and he's highlighted in green, showing that he's a great value compared to ADP. And by the way, if you want those tiers updated weekly, sent to you via email, my wants list, my top 200 players in this year's Supreme cheat sheet, and it's going to be free as an add-on thanks to prizepicks.com. So if you want to make your friends say, how does this guy keep winning? Check the link in the description so you can get the free add-on. Now, James Conner is a must draft, and he scored 63% more fantasy points, 23.1 compared to 14.1 when Chase Edmonds was not on the field. And if we take a quick look at the depth chart, oh yeah, Chase Edmonds is no longer there. They actually chose James Conner over Edmonds in free agency. Edmonds is now in Miami. And all they did was draft a 6th round running back in Keontae Ingram. Not concerned there. They still have Eno Benjamin, who's never broken through, including last year when James Conner was playing. And they signed Darrell Williams from the Chiefs, who was fine at times last year. People are going to say he's great, but he's nowhere near as efficient. Outside the top 40 running backs in efficiency, when Chase Edmonds has been top 5 since 2019. Now, I'll admit, Conner's 18 total touchdowns from last year are not sustainable. However, according to Pro Football Focus, he was expected to score 11 rushing touchdowns and 0.7 receiving touchdowns, so about 12 total touchdowns, ranking 2nd amongst running backs in expected TDs behind only Jonathan Taylor. Now, Conner finished 5th overall last year with 239 points, but even if you take away the 6 other touchdowns that he was not expected to score, which is 36 fantasy points, his 203 points would still be tied with Aaron Jones for top 12 amongst running backs. However, he's going right now as the running back 15 in the 3rd round of drafts, and there's no Chase Edmonds. Now, these are the must-draft running backs for this year, and if you want to see even more running backs that your league mates are ignoring and are passing on in drafts mistakenly, check out this video right here.